The human imperative, the orators for which are Raza Degati, Arif Mahmood and Tappu Javeri will now be taking place in this very hall, which is known as the Shahid Hall. And the session that was taking place here, titled Central Asia Interview with the President, is now taking place in the Tollington Hall. So please take note of that. With that, I'd also like to inform you that the new schedule has been updated and you can get your copy from the information desk. Secondly, there's an emergency exit at the back, so in case of emergency, please do approach that exit. Thirdly, no one is allowed to approach the stage while the panel discussion is taking place, and book signing discussions will take place after the session. With that, I would like to introduce the orators for this session today, which is titled Inside the Labyrinth, a take from Pakistan on David Bowie. The orators are Mr. Kamiar Rokni, Menezes. David Bowie is the stuff musical genius is made of. An innovator, a fantasist, an alien outsider looking in, and above all, someone who channeled successive stages of his life and several alter lives into music in the most modern forms possible. Born in Brixton as David Jones, he changed his name so not to be confused with the Monkees, Davy Jones. But his trajectory was very, very different. Some of the younger music fans sitting in this room may not know David Bowie that well or with as much clarity as those who have grown up listening to his music. But suffice it to say that from Madonna to Nirvana and even Vanilla Ice have counted him as inspiration. Recently, the Grammys, I think some of you may have seen this, Lady Gaga performed a tribute to him, red mullet hair and attitude to boot. Of course, she didn't do it as well as Bowie. Yeah. Listen to him or sing or perform and you know exactly why the original can't be matched. But what can Bowie mean to us sitting in Pakistan? Or if we come, as one of our panel has, all the way from Egypt. So on our panel today, we have Mone Eltahawy, feminist writer, rebel with a definite cause and a major David Bowie fan. And then we have Kamiar Rokni, Lahore's very own fashion icon, obviously very popular. And then we have, for lack of a better word, economist Zaid. Yeah. But he's the only one on this panel who's actually experienced a David Bowie concert. So he's going to tell us about that as well. And then we have Menezes, a Pakistani musician who has grown up listening to David Bowie, and when, you know, Once you listen to David Bowie, you would be forever changed. So that's our panel today. And I think we'll start off with a question to Kamiar Rokni, since he's a local boy, yeah? So we were just listening to Rebel Rebel. And it says, got your mother in a whirl, she doesn't know if you're a boy or a girl. And that is pretty much a major theme with David Bowie?
Well, absolutely. I think he's one of the people who put gender fluidity out into the forefront.
Yeah, I mean, he basically dressed up in a dress for a cover, and he took glam rock to its most creative part.
Absolutely. I think he really understood the power of a good frock. And when he, for years actually, in the 1960s, was trying to get famous, and he didn't quite hit the mark. And, you know, he started off as a mod, and he had that whole mod look going on, and then he was a folk singer and a hippie singer. And then he met Angie Bowie, who is his wife, and actually quite influential on him as far as style was concerned. And she was quite outré and out there, and she sort of said, why don't you just go for it? So his first album that really sort of began to get him attention, which was The Man Who Sold the World, he decided to wear a dress. And the rest is history.
And what do you think made his play with gender so exciting? I mean, you know, he just played with, he was a boy, he was a girl, he was androgynous. What made it so exciting?
I think it's a testament to the power of transformation. It wasn't just gender, but, you know, he was one of the first people to adopt different characters. And he was, naturally blessed with those gorgeous cheekbones and the height, and he was, you know...
He actually didn't have to put makeup on for those cheekbones, though he did all the time. But he just had the most amazing cheekbones. I wish I did, but anyway.
He was just very naturally stylish and sexy, and I think he had a sense of timing. I think it all came together for him at the right time, and it was, you know, the right combination. It just worked. You know, some people have it, and he had it in spades.
In spades. Can we have another clip, please? This is an interview clip from 1972 or 73. And you'll get an idea of what David Bowie looked like. Well, as soon as clip number 2 comes on. Any luck with the clip?
Well, all right. I find that I'm a person who can take on the guises of different people that I meet. I can switch accents in seconds of meeting somebody, and I can adopt their accent. I've always found that I collect. I'm a collector. And I've always just seemed to collect personalities, ideas. I have a hodgepodge philosophy, which really is very minimal.
Do you believe in God, for instance?
What?
Do you believe in God?
I believe in an energy form, but I wouldn't like to put a name to it.
Do you indulge in any form of worship?
Kind of question you get asked in Pakistan.
I love life very much indeed.
You speak.
Obviously, he has better earrings than I have on right now, but anyway. I think I'll ask Mona the next question. David Bowie talked about being gay, and then he talked about being bisexual. And, you know, he sort of went from one to the other. Do you think that he was making sexuality more elastic, more mundane in a way, and making gender perhaps, as maybe somebody like Judith Butler would put it, more performative?
I think he was I want to think that David Bowie was trying to be honest and opening himself up to sex and life in a way that many of us hold back. I mean, I remember my first experience with David Bowie being a poster that I had when I was about 9 or 10 in London, because my family moved to London from Cairo. But like, you know, here's this 9, 10-year-old girl who was drawn to this amazing Ziggy Stardust makeup and everything. And you know, I followed his career. I wasn't an obsessive Bowie fan, but I loved his music. And I realized now, as an adult, what that meant to me as a 9-year-old who saw this man wearing makeup, who saw this man who was bending sexuality and gender in every direction. I remember I visited Egypt once when I was 13, during the 8 years we lived in the UK. My hair was so short that this Egyptian man walking behind me goes to his friend, that girl was a boy and they gave her a sex change. So I understood that kind of, and because my hair really was short, believe it or not, I was very, very androgynous when I was younger. But I think what I now realize I got from David Bowie, and it's something that I put in my work, is what I call the sexual revolution. Because some of you might know I've written this book, and the subtitle of the book is Why the Middle East Needs a Sexual Revolution. And for me, the sexual revolution is very much what David Bowie represented. And the definition of the sexual revolution for me is, I own my body. And when I begin that definition of the sexual revolution by I own my body, it means many things. Fighting domestic violence, fighting marital rape, all of that is a revolutionary act. But ultimately, for me, as that feminist, as that Muslim, as that girl from Egypt, I own my body means I can have sex with whomever, obviously with their consent, whenever, inside marriage, outside marriage, with a woman, with a man, with 3 women, with 3 men. That's besides the point. What the point is I own my body. And that definition of the sexual revolution is embodied in so much of what David Bowie represents. So when he died, you saw a lot of Egyptians on social media mourning his passing, because for many of us he does represent that sexual revolution that says, I have sex on my terms, under any conditions I want, and flaunting all the conventions of religion, marriage, and gender constraints.
Apparently, David Bowie and Mick Jagger were having an affair, but that's just an aside. Shahid, the next question to you. He was born David Jones, but Bowie's alter egos, the otherworldly pop star Ziggy Stardust, the lightning bolt-edged Aladdin Sane, and the thin white Duke, were brought to life and killed off at will. But why an alter ego? Why not just David Bowie? And I'm just going to, I think that there was a clip here. Is there a clip here? Hello? Yeah. There is a clip for Life on Mars. I think we need to just leave with that clip so that everybody can get it.
It's a god-awful small affair to the girl with the mousy hair, but her mommy is yelling no, and her daddy has told her to go, but her friend is nowhere to be seen. Now she walks through her sunken dream to the seat with the clearest view, and she's hooked to the silver screen. But the film is a sad thing for, but she's lived it 10 times or more. She could spit in the eyes of fools if they ask her to focus on Zaid.
Just an idea of how good turquoise eyeshadow can look.
Okay. You asked about why he chose different personas.
And a little bit about the personas,
Yeah.
so
Well,
share that.
Okay, she mentioned the fact that I had seen him live. I actually saw him perform as Ziggy Stardust in 1972 at the Odeon Hammersmith. I was studying at Cambridge. It wasn't cool to tell people that you were a David Bowie fan because he was supposed to be very serious and intellectual. So I sneaked off, and I was in London, and I was a David Bowie fan. I'd seen him do, I'd heard his music, Man Who Sold the World, Space Oddity, and he was doing something new. He had come up with an idea of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars. And I was just curious, and I got a ticket, I went to see him. Now he selected a persona that was an alien from outer space that had come to this world, so he could express himself in ways that humans were not allowed to express themselves. And he just was this androgynous creature with makeup, blonde hair, ridiculously blonde hair,
That was just a thin
and
white
thin as a stick, wearing a costume that looked like he just stepped out of a spaceship. Not an astronaut, but some kind of super alien. And I think he adopted these personas simply because he felt that that was was a very easy way, at least that's my understanding, easy way of getting around these stereotypes that were being put on him. I remember watching a BBC documentary where they just didn't know what to make of this man. They were totally confused. The man who was giving the narrative was not sure whether he should criticize him because he was so popular. He wasn't sure whether he should make fun of him because, again, he was so popular. But he kept harping on the fact that there's this man with makeup on his face, with a gold disc on his forehead, thin as a stick, who doesn't look like a man or a woman, and yet there are all these 16-year-olds swooning over him, not sure why is he a sex symbol. And then he added, but it's funny because a lot of men like him too. And it was very confusing, I think, to everyone, particularly BBC and the establishment media. But I think David Bowie embodied that otherness, and he decided that, look, I'm going to make myself an alien, people will accept me, and I'll make myself very popular. Then he decided to kill Ziggy Stardust. He created a character called Aladdin Sane, which if you look at it, it is a lad insane. So he's an insane lad. And then he became a diamond dog, half a dog, half man. And then the Thin White Duke, which was a normal person, but by that time he had become a major superstar, and he was acceptable as a person, not as an alien creature.
We're going to play you a clip from Space Oddity, where he is, well, as soon as you hear it, you know what we're talking about.
Ground control to Major Tom. Ground control to Major Tom. Take your protein pills and put your helmet on. 10. Ground control to Major Tom. 6. Commencing countdown, engines on.
And I think there's a 5B clip as well, if you could play that. That was 5A and this 5C as well. Really take
Commencing countdown, engines on. Check ignition and may God's love be with you. This is ground control to Major Tom. You really make me great. And the neighbors want to know whose shirt you wear. Now it's time to leave the capsule if you dare.
Well, the second clip was not David Bowie. The second clip was Lady Gaga. And that was just a few days ago at the Grammys, where she did a tribute to David Bowie. And people like Lady Gaga, Madonna, artists like that, have been inspired by David Bowie. Madonna just sang Rebel Rebel at one of her concerts. Because Madonna said that he was the first rebel that she saw on stage. And because of that, she was able to be Madonna. I'm going to ask Leon here about what it was like. How did you discover David Bowie? And growing up as a musician in Pakistan, were you and your friends listening to Bowie in the 70s? I mean, do you think any Pakistani acts have been influenced by Bowie?
So how come I don't get the sex question?
I think that was the sex question.
want to give a little context, okay, where David Bowie and the music and the Pakistan scene was. You must remember that at that time there was no such thing as video clips, there were no movies, there was no TV, there was nothing of the sort like that. So the music you got from the radio. As a band, as a musician at that time, we used to listen to Voice of America, BBC, tape music off the radio, then go and practice it and play it. The other interesting thing was that live bands were used for all parties, dances and stuff like that. So people wanted dance music, and so you had a lot more other music. David Bowie's music in terms of the dance part came very much later. But what inspired the musicians was, well, we had to read about David Bowie in black and white, by the way, okay? So we didn't know he was wearing this kind of makeup. It was the beautiful chord changes that he had in all his music. So even though you were playing more traditional stuff, you know, you played the Led Zeppes and the Santanas and the Deep Purples and stuff like that, David Bowie is what you wanted to listen to when you know, smoking other than the conventional stuff. I can say that. If I'm not talking about sex, I can talk about that, right?
It usually goes together, but okay.
Yeah, okay. So it was that kind of stuff. So, you know, you have all your musical influences and what you can actually go and do with it. So in private, we are different people, and in public, we're something else. But musicians didn't wear makeup. I remember once wearing nail polish to a concert. That's about as outlandish as we got. You used to wear hats and gloves and stuff like that, but you wouldn't get into the makeup and the outfits that you would have.
A pity, yeah.
Oh, what a shame.
Yeah.
What a shame.
Please
Comment.
join in.
Can I just make a comment? You might have heard one of the first things he says in Space Oddity is, and all the papers want to know whose clothes you wear. So what he was doing, this was 1969, the celebrity idea. That papers are not interested in Major Tom being the first man in space and the first man being lost in space. They want to know whose clothes you wear.
That's why we have Kamiar.
Yeah.
Well, absolutely. I mean, touching on celebrity culture even before we have what we have today, which is everybody's a celebrity. But again, you know, David Bowie wasn't just about a pop song. He was about giving a whole complete performance. It was an entire experience. You have to also realize that the kind of concerts that we're used to now, that, you know, people like Madonna and Prince with multimedia, with dancers, with elaborate lighting, it didn't exist. So Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars was actually one of the first concert tours where you had mime, you had dance, you had elaborate lighting, you had elaborate costume. It was because he was interested in the world of theatre. He trained as a mime. He worked with Lindsay Kemp, who's a very, very famous choreographer, and a mime artist who he also had a love affair with. He surrounded himself in the gay subculture. He hung out with Andy Warhol, met all sorts of cool, interesting people that, as he said, that he was a collector. So, you know, he was the original borrower before, say, someone like Madonna, who made an entire career out of it.
I think we're going to go on and ask Mona. You grew up in South London, which is just a short while from where David Bowie was born at Brixton. And what was about, you know, we listened to Rebel Rebel as well, and what was about his eccentricity, about being open, that made you sort of, you know, as a young girl, respond to David Bowie?
You know, when the clip opened for Life on Mars, I mean, my first thought was, my God, he's fucking beautiful. You know, that he really is. There's just something about him. And again, it transcends, as we've all said, you know, gender and any kind of attempt to define sexuality and who we should and shouldn't like. But you know, London at that time was an incredible place. Because my parents moved to London at the end of 1974 from Cairo. And I remember one of the things that they would always ask, and then my brother and I joined them in June of 75. And I was 7, my brother was 3, and you know, we'd go out, and London back then was just this incredibly open, loving place. It was a lot of poverty, it was very grimy in many places. South London was quite grimy at the time, and even though we lived in North London and we moved to South London, my primary school was in Whitechapel, East London. So I had that kind of like, bottle of water, do you know what I mean, mate? But then also I'd be, you know, in South London, innit? So I had all those experiences of London. London. And for me, it was just, my head was turning everywhere. It was David Bowie, it was punk, it was the Sex Pistols, it was every kind of destruction of establishment you can imagine. And I remember we'd go to the park with my parents and they would go, these English people, we can't tell if that's a boy or a girl. It was literally lifted from the lyrics of Rebel Rebel. So for me, when you're a child, that kind of excitement and anything that makes your parents go, what the fuck is going on, is incredibly attractive to you. And so I was like, well, this guy's onto something. Therefore, he was on my wall, And then, later, and being in South London as well, I remember the Brixton riots, because, I don't want to make London be just this very glamorous place, which now has become incredibly unaffordable. But back then, in the 70s and early 80s, you had things like the Brixton riots, and I know that David was always this Brixton boy, and he was so beloved in the neighborhood, even though, we ended up not living there for a very long time, but there's still a mural there to him with the Ziggy Stardust face, and as soon as it was announced that he had passed, people were leaving flowers and candles. So he represents that late 1970s London kind of fuck everything established, fuck what parents want, and just, get out there and break it. I wasn't at the time able to break apart from all of that. I went through many years of a facade of conservatism, because I ended up wearing hijab very soon after we moved to Saudi Arabia. But it was all inside me. All of this kind of the rebel and hot tramp, I love you so, and all this business. And that's why I say when I look back, I realize that even if at the time on that facade I wasn't reflecting everything that I thought David represented, I know that those years were like this germinating blossom. Because now, I talk about sex all the time, you can't get me to shut up. Now I talk about gender fluidity and my right to have sex, like I said, with women or men, I don't care. Because, and we have to, I think many young people in the room might not appreciate what a bombshell it was to have a man in makeup on television in the 70s, even in the UK. You had people, I had friends who would tell me when we were all mourning David, my dad just took one look at him and said, oh my God, the guy's wearing makeup, So he was a revolution in his own right.
A lot of Pakistani men apparently now do wear makeup. I was talking to Nabila, the makeup artist, who said to me that her makeup is worn as much by men as by women, especially on the red carpet. I think that's a good thing, actually. I think that men should look good and better as well, right, Kamiar?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Indeed. Well, as you know, that David Bowie was a singer. He was also an artist because he painted and he's had many exhibitions. Also a movie star. I mean, some of you might remember him from a small role in Zoolander. Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence was another film of his. And we have a clip here from Labyrinth, which is just an amazing, amazing film. So can we have the next clip, please? Is it being re-released? Oh.
It should be.
What an entrance. What an entrance. That's how you enter a room. Everybody has to look at you. Shahid, you obviously love his films. And we've been talking about this quite a bit. What to you were like his iconic roles? I mean, obviously Labyrinth was one of them.
Right. He's made at least a dozen films, which I'm sure many of you have seen, but most people don't know about them. And this alien persona of his was made into a film by Nicholas Roeg called The Man Who Fell to Earth. And probably that's his greatest film, and probably one of the greatest science fiction films ever made. I've always described it as E.T. written by Jean-Paul Sartre or Albert Camus. It's an existential science fiction film about a man who fell to Earth from an alien planet, looking like David Bowie, orange hair, but otherwise dressed normally, who's a genius, who becomes incredibly rich, wants to go back to his planet because his planet is dying, cannot find his way back, and is stranded on Earth. He's picked up by the government, experimented upon, he's tortured, and he ends up living on Earth as an alcoholic. An old man, alcoholic, and that's how the film ends. It's an incredibly moving film, and it was almost as if the film was written for him and tailor-made for him. But then he's made movies like Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence with Nagisa Oshima, which some of you might know as the director of In the Realm of the Senses, which was probably the first XXX rated art film ever. And he acted with Yuichi Sakamoto, the other very famous Japanese musician. And it was a very, very different role. Again, he plays a prisoner of war in the Second World War who is in a Japanese prisoner of war camp with a prison commandant who's Sakamoto, falls in love with him. But he cannot express his love, so he tortures him. And it was a very moving, very, very difficult film to watch because there are these two men who are in love with each other but who are being tortured. One is torturing the other because he cannot express his true emotions. He made The Hunger with Catherine Deneuve. He's made Just a Gigolo. I can go on. He also, incidentally, was a theater actor. He acted as the Elephant Man on Broadway. David Pomerantz's Elephant Man played David Merrick. Again, I have seen him perform that.
Shahid gets all the fun stuff, because obviously, all the things that we wanted to do and
being a David Bowie fan, I found myself in New York and I made sure that I saw The Elephant Man with David Bowie performing that. He was incredible because he was playing a character, David Merrick, who some of you might know was perhaps the most deformed man ever known to mankind. He was born with this incredible disease where his whole body looked like an elephant. And so did his face. And David Bowie, this incredibly beautiful man, was playing David Merrick. He used no makeup. All he did was his facial expressions and his body movement. He showed how the inner beauty of this man, that's what the play is about, that inside this horrible, horrible creature was a beautiful soul. And David Bowie played that character. So he was a great actor. He's also influenced, incidentally, if I could just say one more thing, he's also influenced an enormous number of filmmakers. One of the most iconic films, I think, of all time is a film called Blade Runner. And David Bowie was the inspiration, Ridley Scott claims, for the replicants, particularly Daryl Hannah in the movie, who plays this replicant and a robot in Alien. And the inspiration for that was David Bowie. So he's influenced filmmakers, he's influenced artists,
and of course,
and fashion designers.
Fashion, which is what we're moving on.
In terms of artists, you talked about Andy Warhol. David Bowie is really the man who made Lou Reed the international superstar that he was, because he produced his album Transformer Lou Reed was very well known in New York, but he wasn't known around the world. And David Bowie produced Transformer and made Lou Reed an international superstar. He also produced Bebop and the Stooges and made all of them superstars. He set up a studio in Berlin before Berlin became popular or trendy. So he was a trendsetter.
In so many ways. And we're now going to move on to something that I think all of you here would be very interested in, which is fashion and David Bowie. And we'll start off with a little clip from Blue Jeans, which was a song which came out in the 1980s, I think, mid-80s. And you can get an idea of how fashion was interwoven into David Bowie's sensibility, into his music, into how he came across to the world. We have the next clip. Another great entrance from David Bowie. Kamiar, David Bowie was as much a fashion innovator as a music vanguard. And what kind of impact do you think his chameleon-like style phases have had on the world of fashion? I mean, what kind of trends did he launch?
Well, he had tremendous impact. I mean, even now until 2013, I think Jean-Paul Gaultier had an entire show devoted to rock stars, and it started with the David Bowie cat suit. The thing is, I mean, he was a real lucky guy. He had the body for fashion. So he tried so many different things. He started off working with Kansai Yamamoto, who was a Japanese designer who was unknown to the rest of the world, until he started working with him for the costumes for Ziggy Stardust and the guys from Mars, I think, sorry. And so he was inspired by Kabuki and hence all those Japanese costumes. And then when Ziggy became too much of a character, he killed Ziggy off and started doing all the soul-inspired music from Philadelphia, and that avatar soon became the Thin White Duke, which was very much based on classic tailoring, slouchy shirts, very baggy pleated pants, and and then he went into his gentleman phase. He just had a real flair for fashion, and he tried out many different things. And he was kind of like fashion itself, constantly transforming and constantly mutating, which makes him such a popular figure in the world of fashion, because he's really,
I think he understood that fashion is for a short duration and styles change.
Absolutely, and nobody loves a chameleon more than people in fashion. And, he just knew how to play with fashion. And if you watch documentaries, all his old friends from school say that he was always very, very well dressed. I mean, he had a natural, innate grace and a natural, sort of innate sense of style, which helped him along the way.
We're good, and there were several designers who were very influenced by.
Very much so.
I think if we show a clip of something that we discussed yesterday. So that, of course, was David Bowie singing Fashion, and that was a Jean-Paul Gaultier.
Yes. There was a Jean-Paul Gaultier Couture show which was inspired by the world of rock, but it opened with, of course, David Bowie. And even now, I think, a season ago or something, Balmain did a show which, a jacket was exactly like something that David Bowie wore. So constantly in fashion. Kate Moss has been on the cover of Vogue dressed up as David Bowie not once, but twice.
We actually have a picture of that, if we could put that up.
And
I'm
in
sure,
fact,
yeah.
she accepted an award, a Brit Award, on his behalf. So, of course, he's much beloved by the world of fashion. However, I mean, when all is said and done, what I would really like to say, despite, we can talk about David Bowie ad nauseum, but what he really essentially was a fantastic musician and an incredible singer. The voice itself is one of the most remarkable singing voices. And as a musician, as a music producer, he was just really fantastic. So it was all those ingredients together that I think make him what he is, not just his play with image, I think.
Yeah. Leon, I wanted to ask you about this, that David Bowie was actually very political as well. He once told off, MTV was interviewing him, and he's turned around and said, but I want to ask you a question, which is why aren't you playing black artists at prime time? And at that time, when MTV first started, they weren't playing black artists. And then he did a few songs where that is the iconic image of Kate Moss. On the left, you have Kate Moss on the French Vogue cover, and on the right, that's British Vogue. So, and she also accepted an award for him at one point. So that link between fashion and David Bowie was quite...
The whole Cool Britannia thing. I mean, Kate Moss is also, for her generation, represents Cool Britannia, and nobody is more sort of cool than David Bowie as far as British style is concerned.
Absolutely. So going back to you, Leon, what we were talking about him being political. So you had a few songs where there was Let's Dance, which he talked about Aborigine culture in Australia and what was being done with that. And then he also did Little China Girl, in which it's about interracial relationships and how that is really special as well. So do you feel that there are any Pakistani artists who sort of understand that whole kind of, I mean, it has to be different type of politics, but the political message is very important in Pakistani music as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, since we're talking about David Bowie, the historical context of what was going on, so whether it was the socialist movement, whether it was Thatcher and the anti-labor policies, whether it was earlier the Vietnam War and the protests and whatever, these things engendered so much of music, so much of art, and so much of political awareness. I think in Pakistan, what happened, we got suppressed during the 80s and, until the dictator went away.
But isn't that music?
So unfortunately, it was not allowed. So when music in Pakistan did come up, we had very, very mild pop that we still love so much, but it was very non-political. And if you notice, all the Pakistani videos in the early 90s, you had to have an obligatory national song. You had to be running around with a flag in your video, but people were not talking about the problems that you have in the country or the political aspects of it. So I don't think that transferred here.
I think it happened later because you have artists like Bigharat Brigade, and you have artists like Ali Gulpir, make the social commentary and critique that he's on. So while they may not look like David Bowie, though I think there is a video in which Bigharat Brigade has got makeup on.
Yeah, the interesting thing here is again now the medium in which you can watch these. Okay, so you're not watching them on mainstream video or Pakistan television or the cable channels. You can watch these all on social media. So you have that impact. There's a lot of underground stuff that is going on, but it's not coming up to the surface that is making this impact that David Bowie had in terms of fashion and film and music and lyrics and stuff like that. I think there's still potential for it to happen.
Please do, please.
I want to throw a bit of a spanner in the works right now because I'm an iconoclast, and as much as I love David Bowie, we all do obviously, we also should talk about the human being that was David Bowie. And one of the biggest difficulties for me after he died was learning, because I did not know, that he was among the many rock stars at the time who had sex with underage girls, a 14-year-old girl. And this is a huge problem for me because, you know, as I said, I talk about sex all the time. I'm very open. My book is dedicated to the girls of the Middle East and North Africa. I say, be immodest, rebel, disobey, and know you deserve to be free. And at the same time, I fight child marriage like hell. Here in Pakistan, you have the Council of Ulamas who refuse to put a limit on or put an age of marriage because it's quote unquote un-Islamic. In Egypt, we sell teenage girls to these Gulfies who come with, you know, millions of dollars. So this is something that I have been fighting as a feminist who believes in the free expression of sexuality between consenting adults. But then I discover that David Bowie was among those, you know, the Led Zeppelin types and all the others at the time who had sex with 14-year-old girls, and it's a huge problem for me. And I'm sitting there, and obviously the lesson of this is our so-called idols, which is why we should all be iconoclasts, are human beings. Are human beings who fucked up a lot. And we have to take that, this whole struggle between what the artist represents and how we learn to separate the artists from whatever wrongs they did, and how we learn from that, that the human experience is, and that's why I said earlier, when you asked me about him being bi and being gay, and then, and you know, he ended his life married to Iman, the model, for 23 years. Again, this is by way of saying that Bowie, like many of us, stumbled through life. He was this amazing role model. And when I mentioned this about having sex with 14-year-old girls, a lot of my friends in the LGBT community came up, you know, responded, and we had a robust discussion about how, yeah, you know, he was that human being with flaws. But at the same time, he presented this hope for all of us who fight for our sexual rights, for all of us who stumble through our own ways through life. But it's really important to remember that human being.
Since we were talking about Let's Dance, which was one of the iconic sort of dance tunes that David Bowie did, and it was also political at the same time. Can we have a little bit from that clip, I think? And right after that, there's Little China Girl. So we're just watching a little bit of his work. It's all from the same time period. Same album actually, the Resonance album. addicted to and still are addicted to. I mean, I think this, all of us were sort of tapping our feet and we all wanted to get up and dance to Let's Dance, so we held ourselves back for propriety and everything. Well, obviously this is not, this is a rock and roll session, so we will at the end of it probably get up and do the dancing. So what made Bowie's lyrics so distinctive? I'm going to let any of you take this. I mean, what made his lyrics so distinctive? The poetry of David Bowie. Leon. He just wants a sex question.
Well, I was going to say David Bowie had sex with a lot of people. but seriously, if you look at the time also, you remember the song Lola by the Kinks. It was also about this whole ambiguous thing. It was what a girl coming up to ask this guy for a dance and so on and so forth. So it was a lot of the kind of thing going on. But this man was so inspirational. I think I really would like to know where he got his inspiration from, because his impact on people is so great. His fashion impact, his film impact.
I think a very rich, fertile imagination, and obviously somebody who came from the world of art and didn't look at things in just one dimension. He was a huge reader. I mean, he read everything under the sun. In fact, there's a very famous list of 100 books that he recommended. So, voracious reader, very interested in art, theatre, culture. So, I think it all informs your work at the end of the day.
But then to be able to transform it into lyrics that, then put to such great music, it's phenomenal.
Great talent, absolutely.
And the fact that he was a great reader and he wrote, he had read philosophy, he read science, he read a lot of literature, he read history. So he was not just an ordinary person, just a pop star. In 1969, he wrote a song in which he says, Homo sapiens have outlived their use. Was that prophetic? Or was he basically saying, I'm going to come up with Ziggy Stardust in a year's time and whatever? But I think he also wrote about environmental disasters. He wrote about the world coming to an end. He wrote about the fact that we were destroying this world and that we needed to come up with ideas that transcended ordinary thinking.
Yeah.
So his lyrics were not just song lyrics, they were really political statements in many ways. He was a songwriter. He was almost a poet in many respects.
Yeah, and if you get
his work is respected as such.
Yeah, and I think that one of the two best things about all of what you're saying is that, first of all, David Bowie made it okay to be weird. Everyone who was out there who was weird felt validated because he did all of that. He was a Renaissance man, but he was also, the makeup, the fashion, all of that. And then the fact that you had that commander who was out there, like a satellite around the Earth, who reported space oddity. Remember his name? Commander what? Major Tom. What was his name? The Canadian astronaut who reported that. And he sang it, and he recorded an acoustic version of it in his little spaceship. And it went viral, and it was viewed, 50 million times or whatever. So the fact that he has an impact on astronauts, and the fact that he's so well read, and at the same time makes it okay to be cool. I think he just covered all the ground.
Yeah.
But then just one little thing, in case you didn't get to see it. He sang a song called Ashes to Ashes, in which Major Tom comes back as a jungle.
Yeah, so you always had that twist at the end. We're just rounding this off. As you know, David Bowie passed away in January. And his last album, Black Star, came out literally 2 days, which was his birthday, I think, 2 days, and he died 2 days later. And it is an absolutely iconic work. If you haven't heard it, you have to hear it. It is about a man grappling with his mortality. And he knew that he was dying of cancer, and he decided to devote that last year making an album and talking about mortality and talking about death. And we're just going to show you 2 clips from there. It is very morbid, it's very dark and somber, but it's absolutely brilliant. The song is called Lazarus, the album is called Black Star. This is a clip from Black Star.
In the figure of all men, in the figure of all men.
That was from Black Star, and now we see a clip from Lazarus, in which he's lying in his hospital bed.
Scars that can't be seen. I've got drama, can't be stolen. Everybody knows me now.
I mean, how can anyone not be affected by that? And to just look mortality in the mirror and in the eye, and to be able to create art out of death as you leave the world, to leave this kind of legacy and this music, that and the whole body of work that he's done. But what is he saying here? I mean, what is he saying to the world in Black Star? Kamiar?
Well, I mean, you know, he's a man facing his mortality, and for me, Black Star chose to release it is just, you know, you kept saying what a way to make an entry, but this is really a very elegant way to make an exit.
I think we are so lucky to have lived at the same time as David Bowie. You know, just absolutely. I mean, we don't need to say anything beyond this. If there's any, we just have literally have 5-10 minutes maximum, or 5 minutes.
Yes,
almost none.
Yeah, one last thing. Incidentally, in December, the show written by
Lazarus,
David
the
Bowie,
musical.
Lazarus is playing on Broadway. It's a musical which is based on the book on which the film The Man Who Fell to Earth was based.
Yeah.
So
everything, I mean, everything comes full circle. I mean, if you notice, there was an astronaut in the first clip who lay dying.
Yes.
So we all have to come to terms with mortality and with death, but very few of us are lucky enough to make it into a work of art.
Can I say something very brief? Because I would like to address the young people in the audience. Because as I said, I think for young people who weren't there at the beginning of David Bowie's career, but now know what we all feel about him. If there's anything that I've learned personally from David Bowie's life, is that, you know, as a sexual revolutionary, as I like to identify, and as someone who's determined to make the words virginity and hymen obsolete in the dictionary, especially for people in our part of the world. I'm not Pakistani, this is a panel about Pakistan and David Bowie, but I'm Egyptian, and there's a lot in common between our cultures. As someone determined to make virginity and hymen obsolete, I want young people in this room to reflect on what David Bowie meant in this world in which sexuality is so off limits for us. Fight taboos, break down those taboos and the walls of shame, make virginity and hymens obsolete, and ask, in a world that believes in virginity and hymens, what does it mean unless there's a penis and a vagina involved? And I'm being intentionally open and crude here, because there's no such thing as virginity if it's 2 penises or 2 vaginas or anything like that. Learn from David Bowie's career that it wasn't just music, it wasn't just art. It's a real exploration of human sexuality and breakdown of taboos that suffocate us, especially in our part of the world, and become sexual revolutionaries, because that is the path to freedom.
So I think the one message, if there's one message we can take from this, and one lesson that we can take from David Bowie, our little rock and roll session that we've had here, where we've all been wanting to dance, is just be yourself and have the guts, like David Bowie, to stand up and be counted.
So I'm going to go out and get ready.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you.